Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The young ensign's hand sliced the air like a stop sign, crisp, authoritative, rehearsed. His posture radiated the confidence of someone who'd never been tested by anything more dangerous than his own ambition. Around him, the low murmur of officers softened into curiosity. The woman he was addressing didn't flinch. Lieutenant Commander Aaron Carter finished pouring the coffee, her movements calm, precise, unbothered by the weight of the stairs around her. A few quiet chuckles rippled through the room. Someone whispered, "Guess admin's getting bold these days." Carter placed the cup down carefully before answering. Her voice was level, smooth as steel polished by time. "Understood, Ensign." He doubled down, louder this time, playing for an audience he didn't realize he'd already lost. "Please wait outside. This briefing is classified." Carter finally looked up, not with defiance, with certainty. Her clear blue eyes met his like the horizon meeting a storm. "I'm cleared for this briefing." Laughter again, this time sharper, a little meaner. The kind that fills the air when people mistake silence for weakness. Then the heavy door swung open. Admiral Hensley stepped in mid-sentence, scanning the room with a commander's precision until his eyes found her. He froze. The air changed. "Commander Carter," he said, his voice dropping an octave, then softer, almost reverent. "Ghost Eye." The room went silent. The name hung there, alien to most, sacred to a few. You could feel curiosity bristle into unease. Even the projector's hum seemed to hesitate. Aaron Carter stood motionless. She didn't smile, didn't nod, just stood there in her olive-green flight suit, the faint shimmer of a faded falcon stitched on her left sleeve, the only piece of her old squadron she'd kept. Around her, the room shifted into uncomfortable stillness. She was 34. Her movements, her stillness, both carried the quiet gravity of someone older. 2 years since the rotor wing crash in the Gulf that ended her flying career. The doctors called her recovery miraculous. Carter called it unfinished. A faint limp lingered, the kind that never truly leaves. Metal can mend, but memory takes its time. They reassigned her to naval intelligence, a world of screens and static, not skis and rotors. Data replaced altitude. Silence replaced the rush of air. She didn't argue, she just adapted. That's what survivors do. Her uniform looked plain compared to the medals and ribbons shining around her. She didn't need to match them. She'd already earned her colors, they were just painted on the inside. She arrived before dawn most days, long before the coffee brewed, and stayed after midnight decrypting chatter that no one else wanted to touch. She spoke little, smiled rarely. The new staff called her the coffee runner. They thought she was admin support, the quiet one in the corner who set up projectors and poured drinks. She never corrected them. Pride has no place in survival. Every insult brushed against her armor of silence and fell away. She had learned long ago, the loudest rooms often misunderstand the quietest soldiers. That morning, as officers traded small talk and laughter, Carter adjusted a cable by the projector table. The ensign, Evan Baird, noticed her crouched beside the equipment and frowned. "Ma'am, you can just leave the cables there. Tech will handle it." His tone was polite but brittle, the kind of politeness that cracks under real authority. Carter didn't look up. "They're misaligned. If we start like this, the main feed will lag by a full second." He blinked. "I'm sure it'll be fine." She continued threading the line, her movements practiced, almost graceful. The low hum of cooling fans filled the pause. A colonel leaned toward another officer and muttered under his breath, "Did HR send a barista or a pilot today?" Soft laughter rippled through the group. Carter didn't react. She coiled the leftover cable, slid it beneath the console, and rose. "Ready when you are, sir." Evan cleared his throat, forcing authority into his voice. "We'll begin once the Admiral arrives." He didn't thank her. He didn't even look at her. He didn't have to. In his mind, she didn't matter. The door opened. Admiral Hensley entered, the kind of presence that fills a room like gravity. Conversations cut off instantly. Every back straightened. Carter moved toward the rear wall, folding her arms loosely, observing, invisible. The Admiral started the briefing, voice calm, measured, deliberate. Carter's role was supposed to end there, quiet observer, anonymous support. But fate has a way of peeling silence open at the seams. Midway through the session, the Admiral gestured to the wall display. Next slide. Ensign Baird tapped the remote. A satellite map filled the screen, an aerial view of the Gulf corridor. He began reading the summary, words rehearsed, confident. Sector Delta, coordinates 82753540. This is the current flight restriction line. Carter's eyes narrowed. The numbers hit her like a pulse from the past. Desert wind, radio static, a ridge line burned into memory. She took a slow breath. "Correction, sir." Heads turned. Baird blinked. "Excuse me." Her tone remained even. "The coordinates on that slide are off by 2 clicks east. The actual restriction line runs at 82753561. Silence. Then came a chuckle from a Navy captain near the far end. "That's precise of you, Commander. Planning to fly it yourself." Laughter again. Carter didn't flinch. "If you check the live overlay, you'll see the error." Admiral Hensley turned toward the tech officer. "Verify that." Fingers moved across a keyboard. Data flickered, recalculated. The new line appeared exactly where she said it would. The room fell quiet. The Admiral gave a single nod. "Correction accepted. Good catch, Commander." No one laughed this time. Baird's face flushed. He forced a smile. "Appreciate the attention to detail, ma'am." She didn't respond. Her gaze stayed on the map. But silence has weight, and in that silence, respect began to shift, molecule by molecule. During the break, Baird tried to reclaim control. "Commander, if you're refilling, I'll take mine black." The remark landed like a bruise. A few people snickered, half-hearted this time. Carter didn't even look at him. She walked past, calm, distant. The Marine major at the table muttered, "Relax, she's not." "Just kidding," Baird interrupted. But the edge in his voice betrayed him. Carter returned to her post near the wall. Her eyes stayed on the map, Sector Delta, the valley, the crash, the night everything changed. In that sterile room under fluorescent light, she was watching her own history being briefed by people who only knew it from reports. The irony wasn't lost on her. Voiceover slows. Have you ever watched someone humiliated in silence and wondered how long they'd take it? Carter's jaw tightened, not from anger, from restraint. Dignity survives best when guarded by patience. The Admiral spoke again. New slides, new chatter. Officers debated intelligence intercepts, patterns, predictions, all confident, all detached. Baird's voice threaded through the noise, loud as ever. "Based on these coordinates, enemy frequencies align roughly here." He circled an area with a red laser, the same valley where her helicopter went down. The breath caught in her chest, the memory unfolded, the hiss of alarms, the burning smell of oil, the decision to land instead of eject. Now she stood, 2 years later, watching a red dot sweep across the same valley, her valley, as if it were just another line on a map. She drew a slow breath. The hum of the projector, the faint tap of pens, the ache in her leg pulsed steady, grounding her back in the now. She'd been through worse, far worse, but part of her wondered, how many more times would she have to watch her history rewritten by strangers before someone remembered she was there? A captain questioned telemetry from a prior mission. "Data's incomplete," he said. "Whoever flew that sortie didn't maintain altitude. Patterns erratic." Carter closed her eyes briefly. Erratic, that word again. She remembered the chaos, the alarms, the flares, the voice on the comms calling for help. Erratic had meant saving another crew's life. Baird chuckled. Maybe that pilot was having a rough day. Something inside her shifted, not anger, alignment. The pilot held altitude because enemy radar was jamming the guidance, she said evenly. The erratic pattern is countermeasure drift, not error. The room froze. And how exactly would you know that, Commander? The captain asked. Carter met his gaze steady. Because I ran that telemetry personally. Silence. Then Admiral Hensley spoke, not looking up from his notes. She's correct. That pattern saved another crew that night. You could feel it. The room changed temperature. No one laughed anymore. Baird cleared his throat but said nothing. The projector's hum filled the space like a heartbeat. Carter gathered her notes, calm, controlled. Inside, her pulse raced with the ghosts of rotors and firelight. She survived that night, but sometimes survival comes with a different kind of wound, being forgotten. Outside the briefing room, the corridor waited, quiet, sterile, cold. The scent of polished metal hung in the air. Carter leaned against the wall for just a moment, letting the ache in her knee remind her she was still here. Then she straightened, took a breath and walked on. Behind her, the laughter started again, thinner now, hollow. The kind of laughter people use when they're not sure who's still listening. But the Admiral didn't laugh. He stared at the map still glowing on the wall, the correction that had just changed the tactical overview. He didn't say it aloud, but in his memory one name resurfaced. Ghost Eye. And somewhere down the hall, the woman they thought was invisible kept walking, steady, quiet, carrying a history no one dared to see. What happens when silence starts speaking louder than rank? The corridor hummed with fluorescent light. Carter walked its length like a shadow stitched to purpose, her limp almost invisible unless you were looking for it. Her boots clicked in measured rhythm, not defiance, not pride, discipline. Each step a reminder that movement itself was victory. Behind her, the briefing room murmured back to life. Laughter again, forced this time. Papers shuffled, pens tapped, voices trying to sound casual, pretending the air hadn't just shifted. She knew the type. She'd seen it before, men who needed the illusion of superiority like oxygen. They would talk louder now, make more jokes, anything to drown out the sound of their own unease. Erin Carter didn't need to drown anything. She'd already lived underwater once, in fire, in silence, in gravity pulling her down toward desert sand that glowed like molten glass. That night in the Gulf came back in fragments. A warning light, static on the comms. Ghost Eye, we've lost your visual. I copy, she'd said, calm, too calm. The valley below was a throat of smoke and tracer fire. Marines pinned down, the second bird down, no air cover, no extraction window. Her co-pilot had said it first, we're out of options. But she'd kept flying, dropping altitude through flak that sounded like hail on metal. She didn't need options, she needed distance, just enough to reach them. A flash tore through the cockpit. Then the ground rose fast, faster than her training manual ever warned. Impact. The sound after impact is something no one ever tells you about. It's not a boom. It's not silence either. It's breathing that doesn't sound like your own. She remembered crawling through smoke, dragging a wounded Marine by his vest, one leg useless, one hand burning. Come on, she'd whispered. He said something about angels. She said something about orders. 2 hours later, they were airborne again. She never remembered how she got them out, only that she did. They told her she'd blacked out before extraction, half buried in sand beside her own chopper, headset still on, still transmitting coordinates through static. And when she woke in the hospital, they told her she'd saved 6 men. She asked for her co-pilot first. He didn't make it. After that, her world went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, the kind that hurts. The kind that hums behind your ribs like an unfinished transmission. Now 2 years later, she'd built her life around that silence, controlled it, contained it. She learned to move through rooms without drawing sound. To be underestimated, it was safer that way. Until today. She reached her office, a small, windowless space lit by screens and the soft pulse of code. A war fought in data. She sat, logged in, and stared at the blinking cursor waiting for input. It felt alive, impatient. Her reflection ghosted in the monitor. Scar at the temple, eyes too tired to be 34. She flexed her wrist, the titanium bracelet catching light, ghost I-07. Not a decoration, a reminder. Outside, footsteps echoed in the hall. Brief, sharp male. Baird's voice drifted past, too casual. She's just bitter, probably wanted to stay in the air. Another voice, lower, uncertain. Admiral seemed to know her. Please, she's probably just old friends with someone upstairs. Carter heard every word. She didn't move, didn't even blink. There's power in letting people underestimate you. It's like flying under radar. You see everything before they ever know you're there. A message pinged on her screen, classified request for data verification from the same tactical session she just attended. She scanned the code, the coordinates again. Delta sector. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Something didn't align, not the data, the tone. She typed 3 lines, ran a decryption trace. The signal pattern wasn't from routine communication. It was embedded, hidden, almost intentional. Someone had rewritten data packets in that report. She leaned back, heartbeat slowing. If those coordinates were wrong in briefing files, then the next operation relying on that data would be walking straight into a trap. She exhaled, quiet, controlled. That's when the power flickered, just once, enough to make the screens blink, the hum of the servers stagger, a warning. Then black. Systems down. For a moment the base sounded alive in all the wrong ways. Footsteps, curses, static radios. Network failure, all feeds offline. A voice shouted from the hall. Carter stood, instinct taking over before thought. She opened her emergency terminal, checked the diagnostic board. Local systems stable, power intact. Only the network spine had failed. That wasn't normal, that wasn't random. And somewhere above the chaos, Admiral Hensley's voice cut through, calm as ever. Get me the briefing room back online. Carter was already moving. The corridor filled with officers pretending to know what they were doing. Baird was one of them, waving his tablet, muttering acronyms like incantations. Carter slipped past them, re-entered the briefing room. The map on the main screen was gone, replaced by a gray grid and the words "no signal." The Admiral stood near the table, arms crossed, watching the chaos with the quiet patience of a man who's seen real emergencies. His aide hovered beside him, silent, recording details with his eyes, not his pen. 3 tech officers swarmed the console. Buttons clicked, passwords re-entered, cables yanked and plugged again. Nothing. Baird leaned over one of them. It's probably a cache conflict, he said loudly, as if volume could fix software. Carter's gaze moved to the equipment rack at the back wall, the heartbeat of the system. One port's indicator blinked wrong, not dead, not alive, dying. She felt it in her bones before she knew it in her mind. A microfracture. She turned toward the Admiral. Permission to interface manually, sir. Baird heard her first. He laughed short and sharp. Ma'am, this isn't a coffee machine. A few officers chuckled, more out of habit than humor. Carter didn't even glance at him. Her eyes stayed on the Admiral. Hensley looked at her, then at the flickering port she'd noticed. Recognition moved across his face, not surprise, memory. Granted, he said. Carter knelt beside the rack, careful with the bad knee. The motion was practiced, graceful even in restraint. She unlatched the access panel, revealing the mess inside, a patient mid-surgery. Rows of ports blinked like tired eyes. She slid on static gloves and reached in, fingertips listening to vibration. She didn't need a schematic. She knew the sound of failure. "Hold primary," she said softly to the nearest tech. "Isolate AUX-3. The young man blinked, startled. "That'll drop the side displays." "Only for a heartbeat." She freed the fiber line, examined it under the light. A hairline crack, enough to collapse a session under pressure. Her voice barely above a whisper, "Routing." The tech mirrored her command on screen. The room watched, silent now, as if afraid to breathe wrong. Carter's fingers moved fast but steady. 10 lines of code later, the gray grid dissolved, replaced by coastline and thermal overlays snapping back into focus. Color flooded the screen again. "Feed restored," said the tech, voice trembling with relief. The room didn't cheer. Competence doesn't invite applause, it just changes air density. The Admiral's gaze shifted to the console, to the faint reflection of her hands on the glass. The cadence of her movements familiar. The way she found the failure before addressing software. The speed. The sequence. He knew that rhythm. He'd flown with that rhythm once, years ago, on comms with Ghost Eye. He didn't say it aloud. He didn't need to. Carter stood, peeling off the gloves, setting them aside with quiet precision. Her knee stiffened as she straightened. She ignored it. The machine purred, the data flowed, order restored. Baird broke the silence first, his voice brittle. "Well done, tech team." No one responded. The Admiral's eyes didn't leave Carter. She gave a brief nod, no more. No triumph, no pride, just duty completed. She returned to her post near the wall, as if nothing had happened. But the air was different now. Officers shifted in their seats, posture straighter. The colonel who joked earlier glanced her way and gave the smallest nod. The Marine major stopped tapping his coffee cup. Respect doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just changes the way people sit. The Admiral leaned toward his aide, voice low. "Where did she transfer from?" The aide paused, considering how to answer. "Records show several units, sir, some redacted." Hensley's eyes lingered on her profile, still, silent, steady. Then back to the glowing screen. He didn't ask again. The briefing resumed, but the noise had gone out of it. Each voice quieter now, each statement more precise. Carter stood near the wall, her shadow cast long across the tile. The same shape it had been 2 years ago when she stood under rotor light. And for the first time in months, the silence in her chest felt lighter, not empty, earned. Narrator tone slows, reflective. Sometimes you don't need to raise your voice to be heard. Sometimes all it takes is a single act done right, when everyone else has given up. By the time the Admiral dismissed them for lunch, no one joked. No one called her coffee runner. They just moved aside as she passed. Even silence has a way of making room for truth. Outside, Carter walked the long corridor again. The sun through the window caught the titanium band on her wrist, the engraving glinting faintly. Ghost I-07. The light moved with her, like a memory that refused to die. What happens the moment you realize you might die, and still decide to keep flying? Carter stared at the window in the corridor, sunlight cutting clean across the floor. For a second, the reflection in the glass wasn't her. It was someone else, younger, unscarred, still wearing the wings. The hum of the building faded, replaced by the low, rhythmic chop of rotor blades. The memory didn't ask permission. It never did. It began with dust, the kind that turns the air copper and grinds between your teeth. Operation Trident Spear. A code name chosen by someone who'd never seen the ground it described. 2 birds outbound from the carrier, Falcon 1 and Falcon 2. Their mission, reconnaissance and overwatch for a convoy extraction gone wrong. Simple on paper, chaos in reality. Carter was flight lead, call sign Ghost I-17. Her co-pilot, Lieutenant Mark Ellis, had the kind of smile that made the worst deployments feel survivable. The night was hot, windless, the kind of quiet that feels wrong. Ghost I-17, you are cleared for approach, the controller had said. Copy that, Carter replied, her tone clipped calm. Holding altitude at 1,200, visual on convoy. Below, tracer rounds stitched the horizon, red threads tearing through the dark. The Marines were pinned, 2 clicks from extraction, taking fire from both ridges. Ellis squinted through the HUD. They're boxed in. Carter adjusted the stick, not for long. They descended into the valley, rotors shuddering in the heat. The radio erupted, overlapping voices, call signs, coordinates, panic. Ghost Eye, this is Raven 2. We're hit, engine 2 gone, taking fire from North Slope. Static swallowed the rest. Carter looked down. The second chopper, Raven 2, trailing smoke, tail dipping dangerously. Raven 2, this is Ghost Eye. Vector left, reduce speed. We've got you. The reply was just static. Ellis turned toward her. We lose them, we lose everyone on the ground. Carter didn't answer, she already knew. She pushed the collective. The bird lurched lower, engine strain climbing into a howl. The valley opened below, a narrow wound in the earth, glowing with muzzle flashes. She could see them now. Marines scattered behind a burnt-out Humvee. One waved a flare, a thin red spark in the chaos. Target visual, mark those coordinates. Got it, Ellis said. Range 200. Drop altitude to 150. Open right door. Right door open. The wind tore through the cabin, carrying the smell of smoke and cordite. Carter could hear her own pulse in her helmet. She lined up the shot. Minigun hot. Firing. The stream of fire ripped down the ridge, precise, rhythmic, controlled. The Marines moved. She could see them running, dragging wounded, shouting into headsets that barely worked. Ghost Eye, you're drawing fire. I'm aware, she said quietly. Ellis laughed under his breath. You always are. Then came the flash. A shoulder-fired missile streaked from the ridge. Break left, Ellis shouted. Carter yanked the cyclic. The chopper rolled hard, the missile skimming past the tail. The warning alarm screamed. The entire frame vibrated under the stress. Damage. Tail rotor hit, partial control. Stabilize. Trying. The next hit came without warning, not a missile, just a spray of lucky rounds that found something vital. The engine coughed once, twice, then failed. Engine 1 down. Switching to secondary. No response. Silence filled the cockpit. The kind of silence that only comes right before gravity remembers its job. Ellis looked at her. We're going in. Carter didn't hesitate. Brace. Impact. The world went white, then red, then black. She woke to the sound of metal creaking. The cockpit half-buried, smoke filling the air. The radio hissed with static. Her leg was pinned, blood in her boot. Ellis was still in the seat beside her, unconscious, breathing shallow. She tried to move. Pain lit every nerve. She gritted her teeth and pushed anyway, using both arms to free herself. The moment her leg came loose, she almost passed out. Ellis. No response. She unbuckled him, dragging him out through the broken side window. The desert night felt colder than it should have. She checked his pulse. Weak. She keyed the emergency frequency. Ghost I-17, Mayday, Mayday, down in Sector Delta. Coordinates. The radio sputtered, broken. She looked toward the ridge. The Marines were still pinned, tracer fire slicing the dark. She could stay, wait for rescue, or move. There wasn't really a choice. She grabbed her sidearm, slung Ellis's rifle over her shoulder, and started toward the ridge on one good leg. Every step burned, every breath felt heavier than air. She found the Marines 15 minutes later, crouched behind a sand berm. Their leader turned, startled. Jesus Christ, you're from the bird. She nodded. What's your situation? Outnumbered, out of comms, out of time. She looked at the sky, too quiet now. The other chopper had gone down too. Where's your wounded? 3 behind the truck, 1 bad. Get them ready to move. To where? She pointed toward the smoke from her wreck. There's a transmitter still alive in my bird. If I can reach it, I can ping a rescue window. That's suicide. Not if you cover me. The Marine stared at her, then nodded. Ghost eye, right? She almost smiled. Let's hope the name still means something. They moved together, short bursts, covering fire. The ridge spat bullets, the sand erupting around them. Carter crawled the last 10 yards to the wreck, heart hammering in her throat. The transmitter was half melted, but the manual switch still glowed. She reconnected the auxiliary battery, crossed 2 wires with the edge of a knife, and hit transmit. The signal blinked once, then twice, then steady. Rescue channel open, she whispered. Now move. She turned, saw Ellis still lying where she dragged him, pale under the flicker of firelight. She stumbled back, grabbed him under the arms, pulled. Her bad leg screamed. The Marines reached her, shouting, "We've got you." Together they carried Ellis and the wounded Marines toward the far ridge, away from the wreck, away from the smoke. Then came the explosion. The heat punched her in the back, throwing her forward into the sand. She rolled, instinct screaming, "Stay down." The night behind her burned orange. She could still hear Ellis breathing, faint, shallow, but alive. Then the radio crackled. "Ghost I-17, this is Rescue Command. We have your signal, hold position." She closed her eyes, exhaling smoke in relief. "Copy that." The chopper's sound came minutes later, heavy, low, beautiful. The downwash flattened the flames as it descended. Marines waved flares. The rescue bird touched down hard. They loaded Ellis first, then the wounded. Carter climbed in last, one arm around her leg, the other gripping the door frame. The pilot turned, shouting over the rotors, "You the one who lit that signal?" She just nodded. "Hell of a move." Carter looked out the door at the burning valley, at the 2 wrecks glowing like twin pyres. "It wasn't luck," she said softly. "It was duty." Then the adrenaline faded, the world tilted, the sound dissolved. Darkness again. She woke 2 days later in medical. Admiral Hensley was there, his uniform still dusty from the field. He didn't say thank you. He didn't say you're lucky. He just said, "You brought 6 of my Marines home." Then he paused. "What's your call sign?" She hesitated, voice rough. "Ghost Eye." He nodded once. "Then that's who you are." After that, she never flew again. The damage in her knee was permanent. The limp a souvenir, the silence her inheritance. Voiceover slows to near whisper. She used to think survival was the reward, but sometimes survival is the assignment, to carry what others couldn't, to walk for those who didn't make it home. Now, standing in that quiet corridor 2 years later, she could still hear the rotors, not in her ears, in her blood. A tech officer passed her, offering a polite nod without recognition. She returned it, no smile, just acknowledgment. Inside, she was somewhere else, hovering over that burning valley, calm under fire, the same steadiness that had just brought an entire briefing room back online. Ghost Eye never left the sky. She just found new ways to see from the ground. The memory faded. The hum of the building returned. Carter looked down the hall. The door to the Admiral's office stood open, voices faint inside. She caught fragments, her name, the word clearance, then a pause that felt like respect. She turned away. Some truths don't need to be repeated. Narrator tone softens, reflective. Sometimes the past doesn't haunt you. It follows, quietly, waiting for the world to remember what you've already lived through. And when it does, the silence ends. What does a hero look like when no one's watching? The night came slow. Not the kind of night that rests, the kind that lingers, heavy and uninvited. The base had long since quieted, replaced by the hum of generators and the distant thump of engines out on the tarmac. Carter sat alone in her quarters, the same room she'd lived in for nearly 2 years. Bare walls, a narrow bunk, a metal desk scarred by the weight of too many reports. The only color came from a single photograph taped near the lamp, 6 Marines, sand-caked and squinting into a sunrise. None of them knew the photo existed. She looked at it the way a pilot watches the horizon, not searching, just making sure it's still there. The air smelled faintly of coffee and engine oil. She'd been working late again, decrypting signal reports that would never have her name on them. The crash came back to her sometimes, not as images but sensations, the pressure before impact, the smell of burnt wiring. The moment silence stopped meaning peace. She had learned to live with it. You don't erase nights like that. You just make space for them to exist quietly inside you. On her desk, her flight patch, the faded Falcon, lay beside a sealed letter. She hadn't opened it. She didn't need to. The letter had arrived a month ago from a family she'd never met. Inside were words that said thank you for bringing him home. She touched the edge of the envelope with her fingers, then slid it back into the drawer. Gratitude was harder to carry than guilt sometimes. A soft knock broke the silence. "Come in." The door opened just enough for Admiral Hensley's aide to appear, young, composed, with the posture of someone who measured every motion. "Commander," he said, "the Admiral requests your presence, 700 briefing room." She nodded, acknowledged. He hesitated. He didn't say why. He doesn't have to. When the door closed again, Carter leaned back in her chair and exhaled. The words hung in the air, briefing room. The same place where she'd been laughed at less than 24 hours ago. She rubbed her temple. The faint scar there itched when she was tired, a phantom reminder of shrapnel and memory. The thought of standing in that same room again didn't scare her. It just felt unnecessary. She didn't need redemption. She had closure the moment the feed came back online. But maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe this wasn't about her at all. She looked at the clock, 03:12. Sleep would be a stranger tonight. She stood, stretched her leg until the joint clicked softly, then limped toward the small window by the bed. Outside, the runway lights blinked like a constellation built for ghosts. A single helicopter lifted into the dark, rotors flashing under floodlight, then vanishing into black sky. She watched until the sound faded completely, then whispered under her breath, "Keep flying." When morning came, the light was harsh, the kind that exposes every scratch on the metal and every shadow under the eyes. Carter dressed quietly, her movements precise, ritualistic. She slid her badge into place, checked her watch, tightened the titanium bracelet on her wrist. Ghost I-07. The mess hall was nearly empty when she passed through. A few officers nodded. Some didn't. The same ones who'd smirked yesterday avoided her eyes now, not out of guilt yet, but confusion. Respect and discomfort often arrive in the same breath. She grabbed a mug of black coffee, no sugar, no milk, and left. The briefing room door stood open when she arrived. The air inside felt heavier than usual, charged, expectant. Officers filled the table again, but something about the room's rhythm had changed. Less chatter, less laughter. Admiral Hensley was already there, seated at the head of the table, reading over a printed report. His aide stood near the wall, clipboard untouched. Carter entered quietly, taking her usual position near the back. No one asked her to pour coffee this time. Baird was there too, posture rigid, expression unreadable. His jaw moved like he wanted to speak, but the words never formed. The Admiral looked up. "Commander Carter." She straightened instinctively. "Sir." "Good to see you early." "Couldn't sleep, sir." "Neither could I." Something in his tone made the room still. He gestured to the screen. "We'll begin shortly." The others took their seats. The screen remained dark. No maps this time, no data layers or graphs, just the Admiral's voice filling the silence. "Before we start, I want to address something." The tone of a man who wasn't inviting commentary. He looked around the room, from one officer to the next, before his eyes landed back on Carter. "Yesterday, something happened in this room that deserves correction." Carter's pulse slowed. She didn't move. The Admiral continued, "Some of you were quick to judge a fellow officer based on perception, on silence, on what you thought you saw." He stood. The movement alone carried more weight than the words. "You saw a flight suit without ribbons. You assumed support staff. You saw a limp and thought weakness. You saw humility and mistook it for absence." He let that hang in the air. Carter wanted to fade into the wall. This wasn't her doing, but Hensley wasn't finished. "Lieutenant Commander Erin Carter is not support staff. She is not admin. She is the former lead pilot of Recon Squadron 7. Call sign." He paused, turning toward her, voice soft but firm. "Ghost Eye." The words dropped into the silence like stones into water, ripples spreading through every face in the room. Whispers rose, small and disbelieving. Someone muttered, "Ghost Eye, the Trident Spear pilot." The Admiral nodded once, the very same. No one moved. Even the hum of the projector seemed quieter. 2 years ago, during Operation Trident Spear," Hensley continued, "2 aircraft went down in hostile territory. Communication was lost. The mission was classified a total loss. Carter flew into the kill zone, alone, with no air cover, to extract 6 Marines trapped in the valley. She stayed in the air until every one of them was clear." He looked at her, eyes steady, proud, heavy. "She lost her co-pilot in the process, lost part of her knee, but she didn't lose her duty." The silence that followed had shape, weight. Baird sat motionless, his face pale. The colonel who'd laughed earlier was staring at his notes as if the paper could swallow him. The Marine major looked at Carter with a quiet reverence he didn't bother to hide. The Admiral exhaled. "I was on that operation. She saved my men, and she saved the mission." He let the truth stand alone. No embellishment, no applause. Carter's throat tightened. She didn't want to speak, didn't want to be seen this way, like a story someone was finally telling after it was too late to matter. The Admiral turned to the others. "Respect is the currency of this uniform. Spend it wisely." No one moved, no one breathed. Then slowly the Admiral faced her again. "Thank you, Commander, for not reminding us who you are." Her voice came quiet, steady. "Just doing my job, sir." The words landed soft, but they carried more force than any speech could. The Admiral nodded once, dismissed. The officers didn't move right away. It was as if they were waiting for permission to exist again. Carter gathered her notes, same calm, same precision, and turned to leave. Her boots clicked against the tile. Behind her, Hensley's voice followed, low but deliberate. "Some of you think courage is loud. It is. Sometimes it walks in silence and waits for you to notice." She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The corridor outside was brighter now. Sunlight slanted through the windows, dust motes floating like static in golden air. Carter slowed her pace, the tension leaving her shoulders inch by inch. The weight of recognition never sat comfortably on her. It felt foreign, undeserved. At the far end of the hallway, a young intelligence officer stepped aside as she passed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ma'am, thank you." She nodded once, "You're welcome." When she reached the exit, she paused, one hand on the door, the other brushing the titanium band at her wrist. "Ghost I-07. She exhaled, long and slow. Narrator tone deepens, reflective. "Some people spend their lives chasing validation. Others carry it quietly, like shrapnel, a wound that no one can see but everyone feels when the truth finally surfaces." Carter never wanted to be remembered. She just wanted to be useful. And somehow, in that small, sterile room full of rank and noise, she'd reminded them all what real strength looked like. Not medals, not bravado, not posture, but composure under fire. The door closed behind her, the sound echoing down the hall like a heartbeat fading into distance. For the first time in 2 years, the silence didn't feel like exile. It felt earned. Why does respect always arrive after silence? The door hadn't even closed before the room began to breathe again, slow, uneven, like men surfacing from deep water. The officers remained seated, but no one looked at one another. Paper lay untouched. Coffee went cold. The air itself had changed. Baird's throat moved once, as if he were trying to swallow something too large, pride maybe. The colonel who joked earlier stared at the table's reflection instead of his notes. The Marine major sat ramrod straight, eyes fixed on the wall, jaw clenched hard enough to tremble. Admiral Hensley stayed standing at the head of the table, hands clasped behind his back. He wasn't reading anymore. He wasn't commanding either. He was remembering. When the door clicked shut behind Carter, the sound cut through the silence like a rifle crack. The Admiral spoke quietly, not to anyone in particular. "Do you know why they called her Ghost Eye?" No one answered. The question wasn't rhetorical, it was reverent. "She could see what the rest of us couldn't," he said. "Through smoke, through chaos, through fear." His eyes lifted from the table, scanning each face. That's what leadership looks like when no one's looking. The aide at his shoulder finally spoke. "Sir, the next session." "Can wait," Hensley interrupted. His voice carried weight again, but softer this time. "Some moments don't repeat." He turned toward the door, the same one she had just passed through. For a moment he seemed caught between duty and memory. Then he exhaled, long, deliberate. "Gentlemen," he said, "on your feet." Chairs scraped the tile. Confusion flickered. The officers looked around, unsure. The Admiral raised his chin. "Stand." Every boot hit the floor. Every spine straightened. The air filled with the crisp rustle of fabric snapping to attention. He turned fully toward the door, toward the empty frame that still held the ghost of her presence. And then he saluted. Slow, deliberate, sharp as a blade drawn in silence. No one moved at first. The sight alone froze them. A 4-star admiral, saluting a woman they dismissed as support staff less than 24 hours ago. Then, like dominoes, every man and woman in that room followed. Colonels, majors, captains, ensigns. One by one, hands rose to brows. The metallic click of heels striking together echoed through the room like thunder rolling across marble. Not ceremony, not command, something deeper. The salute wasn't for rank, it was for truth. For a long breath, no one spoke. You could hear the hum of the projector, the faint throb of fluorescent lights, and the slow rhythm of collective shame turning into reverence. Hensley lowered his hand first, but not his gaze. "We don't salute enough of the living," he said quietly. "We save it for funerals and folded flags, but today—" He stopped, words weren't enough. Behind him the aide swallowed hard and murmured, "Aye, sir." Baird still hadn't moved. His hand hovered at his brow, trembling slightly. When he finally lowered it, his face was pale. He whispered something, maybe a prayer, maybe an apology, but no one heard the words. The Admiral's voice broke the stillness again. "When she walked in here yesterday, you saw a coffee runner. Today you saw courage without ceremony. Don't forget the difference." The silence after that felt sacred. Then, as if pulled by an invisible thread, the door opened. Erin Carter stood there, framed by daylight from the hall. She hadn't left completely. She'd paused, maybe out of instinct, maybe because something in her bones told her not to. She saw them, all of them, standing. The salute midair, the Admiral's hand still at his brow. Her expression didn't change. Not shock, not pride, just quiet understanding. Hensley turned toward her. Their eyes met, blue meeting gray, pilot meeting commander, history meeting witness. He dropped his salute slowly, then said the words that would stay with everyone in that room for the rest of their careers. Welcome home, Ghost Eye. It wasn't a compliment, it was a benediction. The words hung in the air, alive, trembling with the weight of every unspoken thing: guilt, respect, gratitude, grief. Carter straightened unconsciously, her right hand rising in perfect response. The salute she gave back was simple, measured. No flourish, no hesitation. Her fingers trembled slightly at the end. Not weakness, memory. The body remembering rotors and recoil and the taste of sand in the back of her throat. The Admiral's jaw flexed. A muscle in his cheek twitched. Then he gave a small nod, the kind of acknowledgment that exists only between soldiers who have seen the same fire. "Thank you, sir," Carter said quietly. Her voice barely carried, but in the silence it filled the entire room. Every officer who'd ever laughed at her, every superior who'd overlooked her, they were now silent witnesses to a truth that required no apology. Hensley stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "We don't get to choose how history remembers us," he said softly, "only how we show up when no one's watching." She held his gaze, understood. He nodded once more, dismissed Commander. She lowered her salute, posture steady, and turned to leave. The room stayed frozen until the door closed again. Only then did the Admiral speak. His tone, quieter now, meant more for memory than for ears. "Some of you think leadership comes from noise. It doesn't. It comes from composure, from showing up, from doing the damn job." He turned toward Baird. "That's the lesson you missed yesterday. Don't miss it again." Baird's voice cracked. "Aye, sir." The Admiral nodded once, then left the room himself. The moment he was gone, the officers exhaled as one, the air finally moving again, thick with humility. The colonel rubbed his forehead. The Marine major looked at the wall and whispered something that sounded like "Semper Fi." Baird sat down, staring at his hands. They didn't feel like his anymore. The aide remained by the door, quiet, watching the last trace of sunlight vanish where Carter had been. His voice, when it came, was low. "That's how legends walk, quietly." Narrator tone slows, cinematic, reflective. Outside, in the corridor, Carter kept walking. Her boots made no sound against the floor. The light followed her like recognition catching up to someone who'd stopped asking for it. At the far end, a row of windows spilled gold across her path. She paused just long enough to breathe it in. For a moment she saw the reflection of her younger self in the glass, helmet on, headset coiled, ready to lift off. Then the image faded, leaving only the present. She touched the titanium bracelet, Ghost Eye 07. She whispered to herself, not loud enough for anyone to hear. It was never about being seen. The sound barely broke the air. Narrator voice softens, intimate. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it just acts." Sometimes the loudest moment in a soldier's life is the one where they don't say anything at all. And somewhere deep in the building, inside that briefing room that had just relearned the meaning of respect, an echo lingered, not of applause, not of orders, but of a salute still suspended in memory. What happens after silence breaks? By sunset, the story had already started spreading across the base. No one meant for it to. But words like Ghost Eye had a way of traveling faster than official memos. They began as whispers in the mess hall and the hangar, in the narrow corridors between duty shifts. You could hear them carried on quiet breath, half disbelief, half reverence. "You heard what happened in the briefing. They said she was Ghost Eye, the Ghost Eye. The one from Trident Spear. Yeah, the Admiral stood for her." The legend was rebuilding itself, one retelling at a time. But Aaron Carter didn't hear any of it. She was walking along the outer edge of the airfield, the wind pressing faintly against her flight jacket, the faint whine of turbines in the distance. The horizon glowed a tired orange, the kind of sunset that belonged to soldiers, beautiful, distant, fleeting. She stopped at the edge of the tarmac where the concrete met the dirt. Beyond that was the field of empty hangars, steel giants turned to shadow. She knew each one by number, by the way their doors groaned in the heat, by the smell of hydraulic fluid that never washed out. Her steps slowed near Hangar 12, the one they used to keep Falcon 1, her bird. The paint was fading now, the warning signs barely legible. She traced a finger along the frame of the door, feeling the grooves worn smooth over years of hands. For a moment she was back there, headset on, Ellis in the seat beside her, sun bleeding across the canopy, the world still intact. She blinked and the image broke apart. A group of maintenance crew passed nearby, their conversation dying the moment they saw her. They stepped aside instinctively, as if the air itself demanded distance. One of them, barely 20, maybe a cadet, murmured, "Ma'am." She nodded once. No rank, no correction, just acknowledgment. The kid hesitated, then said softly, "My brother was on that convoy, he made it home. I just wanted to say thank you." Carter met his eyes. There was something raw and honest there, not admiration, just gratitude, the kind that didn't know what to do with itself. "You don't owe me that," she said quietly. He shook his head. "Maybe not, but I do anyway." She didn't smile, but the line of her shoulders eased. "Tell him, I'm glad he made it." When they left, she stood there for a long time, the wind tugging at her hair, the sound of distant rotors fading in and out like heartbeat echoes. Voiceover slows. Some stories aren't told for the living, they're kept alive for the lost. That night, Carter sat outside her quarters instead of inside. The base lights glowed like constellations scattered across metal. She held a thermos of coffee between her palms, warmth seeping through the steel, her mind somewhere between exhaustion and memory. She replayed the salute in her head, not out of pride but disbelief. It had felt unreal, like a scene written for someone else. She didn't need the acknowledgement, but something inside her, something buried deep under years of silence, had shifted. For the first time since the crash, she felt seen, not as a survivor, not as a shadow, but as herself. She took a slow sip. The coffee had gone cold, she didn't mind. Her voice broke the quiet, barely above a whisper. "We made it, Ellis." The stars above flickered faintly in the haze. She watched one streak across the sky, brief, burning, gone. Narrator tone deepens, shifting. Across the base, in the Admiral's office, another light still burned. Hensley sat alone, a single desk lamp casting long shadows across stacks of reports. He wasn't reading. Not really. His eyes moved, but his mind was elsewhere, somewhere over a desert valley 2 years old. He reached for the file on his right, black binder, top-stamped Trident Spear / classified. Inside, a single line item marked Survivor LT, CMDR, Aaron Carter, status, active, restricted. He read it again, then closed the file. For a man who'd seen entire wars written into paperwork, this one line felt too small for what it carried. He picked up his pen and began writing on a yellow note card, not official, not recorded, just his own way of remembering. She didn't hesitate, she didn't run, she went back for them. They talk about heroes in speeches. They never mention the quiet ones who stayed behind. He paused, the tip of the pen hovering, then added another line. "Ghost I carried the weight none of us wanted to face." He stared at the words, then folded the note once, twice, and slipped it inside the binder. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his nose. The room felt heavy, the air thick, with the kind of reflection that doesn't fade when the lights go off. He remembered the day she was medevaced off the carrier, knee shattered, blood pressure crashing, her hands still clutching the headset she'd refused to let go. He remembered standing there, wondering how someone that broken could look so composed. She had saluted him even then, lying on a stretcher. He hadn't returned it, he hadn't known how. Now 2 years later he had, and it still didn't feel enough. He reached for his mug, cold coffee. He smiled faintly. Always the coffee, he murmured to himself. He looked toward the window. Outside, the tarmac glowed under security lights. Somewhere beyond, he could just make out the silhouette of a lone figure sitting by the barracks, small, still, facing the sky. He didn't need binoculars to know who it was. He stood, walked to the window. Watched. For a long while, neither of them moved, two soldiers linked by a moment that no rank, no years, no medals could ever replicate. Narrator tone slows, almost a whisper. You spend your life giving orders, thinking command means control, but leadership isn't about authority. It's about bearing the weight you carry when others can't. And in that moment, watching her sit alone under the floodlights, Hensley understood something he'd never said out loud. The bravest thing Carter ever did wasn't flying into that valley. It was surviving it. He turned off the lamp. The office fell into darkness, save for the pale glow from outside. He whispered quietly, "You did good, kid." The words would never reach her, but they didn't have to. Meanwhile outside, the wind picked up soft, warm, pulling faint streaks of dust across the concrete. Carter tilted her face toward it, eyes closed. For a moment she thought she heard something in it, a voice, distant and familiar. Maybe Ellis. Maybe her own conscience finally catching up. "You did good." She opened her eyes, smiled faintly. "Copy that." Narrator tone steadies, emotional and poetic. Some people measure heroism in medals, in missions completed, in body counts. But the real kind, the kind that lingers, is quieter. It's the act of waking up every day, carrying the same ghosts, and choosing to live anyway. Carter finished the last sip of her coffee, stood and brushed off her jacket. The horizon had gone dark now, but the base lights still burned. Somewhere behind her, an engine started, the rhythmic pulse of a bird warming up. She turned, watching as a transport helicopter lifted into the night. The rotor wash tugged at her hair, stirring the air with the smell of aviation fuel and salt. She watched it climb higher, disappearing into the stars. Her voice was soft, almost lost to the wind. "Keep them safe." She started walking back toward her quarters, slow, steady steps echoing across the concrete. Behind her, the sky shimmered with faint traces of heat from the engines, a ghost signature, written in air. Narrator slows, reflective. Tomorrow, the whispers would spread further. By next week, everyone on base would know the name Ghost Eye. And by the time the next operation rolled out, every pilot would glance once at the call roster, hopping, quietly, to fly under the same wing that once carried 6 men through hell. But Carter would never speak of it. She'd pour coffee again if she had to. She'd file reports. She'd limp across hangars. Because for her, service was never about recognition. It was about continuity, the quiet belief that duty doesn't retire. And somewhere deep in her chest, under the scars and the silence, the rotors never really stopped spinning. What do you do when the war comes back? But this time it asks for your wisdom, not your weapon. The following morning came wrapped in mist, the kind of fog that rolled off the sea and made the world look half-erased. The base moved slowly, engines idling, boots echoing on wet concrete, the smell of salt and jet fuel blending into something faintly metallic. Carter woke before dawn as always, habit not restlessness. The clock read 04:37. She sat on the edge of her bunk, lacing her boots with deliberate care. Her leg ached, a dull reminder that pain had long ago become part of her uniform. The mirror above the sink reflected a face that no longer surprised her, lined, steady, eyes too alert for morning. There were no medals on the shelf, no reminders of what she'd done, only the faint smell of coffee brewing in a metal mug beside the window. She took one slow sip, watching the first streak of sunlight slice through the fog. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps, official, precise. "Come in." The door opened. It was the Admiral's aide again, clipboard tucked under his arm, tone clipped but softer this time. "Commander Carter," he said, "the Admiral requests your presence. Ops wing, now." She frowned. "At this hour?" "Yes, ma'am. He said you'd understand." She finished her coffee, set the mug down, and grabbed her jacket. The aide followed her out into the hallway. As they walked, she noticed something strange. The usual buzz of morning chatter was missing. The air felt loaded, like the base itself was holding its breath. They stopped outside a secured operations room, 2 guards flanking the entrance. Carter's badge was scanned, her name checked twice. When the door slid open, she saw Admiral Hensley standing over a projection table, light from the holomap painting his face in blue. He looked up. "Carter." "Sir." "Close the door." The sound sealed the room in silence. He gestured to the projection. "You recognize this terrain?" She stepped closer. The map showed jagged canyons, a dry riverbed, and a cluster of heat signatures near the North Ridge. It took her less than 2 seconds to place it. "Ardèche Province," she said quietly. "Same sector where Trident's spear went down." The Admiral nodded. "We just lost contact with a recon team there, 12 hours ago." Her eyes narrowed. "Extraction compromised. Satellite feeds dead. Signal interference from inside the canyon." Carter's pulse slowed, not from fear, but from memory. That same map had once been covered in red. "Why me, sir?" Hensley studied her for a long moment. "Because I need someone who's seen that ground, someone who understands it, and someone I trust to call it like it is." "I'm grounded, Admiral." "I'm aware," he gestured to a chair. "This isn't a flight order, it's a coordination post." She hesitated. "You want me on Overwatch Command?" He nodded. "You'll run the op from here, direct feed, real-time drone access." Carter crossed her arms. "You have more experienced tacticians." "I have trained tacticians," he said quietly. "I need instinct." The word hung in the air. Instinct, the thing she'd built her entire career on, and the thing the system had forgotten to measure. She exhaled. "When do we start?" Hensley allowed himself the faintest smile. "That's the ghost eye I remember." He pointed to the map. "Our recon bird will re-enter the canyon at 900. You'll have 2 support teams on comms. I'll monitor from command, but you'll make the calls." Carter nodded. "Understood." As she turned to leave, the Admiral's voice stopped her. "Aaron." She paused. He softened. "Yesterday reminded them who you were. Today, remind them why." She met his eyes, steady, unreadable. "Copy that, sir." The room's hum returned as she walked out, boots echoing through the metal corridor. She hadn't realized it yet, but something inside her had reawakened, that steady rhythm, that pulse of control, that calm in chaos that only pilots and soldiers understand. The fog had lifted by the time she entered the Overwatch bay. Screens lined the walls, technicians busy at consoles, comms chatter crisp and clipped. They all turned when she walked in. The junior officer at the main station stood quickly. "Ma'am, systems are green. Drone 1 is online and holding altitude at 5,000 feet." She approached the console, eyes narrowing on the feed. The canyon looked smaller now, flatter from above, but she could still feel the scale in her bones. "Zoom to grid 42, she said. The operator complied. The screen adjusted dust, shadow, faint movement. "Thermals. Negative visual on friendlies, getting interference from the ridge." She leaned forward. "Try infrared overlay, adjust by 10 degrees, trust the motion, not the light." The tech looked at her surprised. "Ma'am, that's a manual correction." She nodded. "Exactly." He entered the sequence. The image flickered, static, blur, then clarity. 6 heat signatures appeared behind a collapsed ridge wall. "There," she said. "Recon team, they're pinned." The room went quiet. "Get me their channel." The comm officer adjusted the frequency. A burst of static filled the speakers, then a broken voice. "Command, this is Raven 6. We're hit low cover, request immediate evac." Carter leaned closer. "Raven 6, this is Overwatch. I have eyes on you. Sit tight." A pause, then disbelief. "Overwatch, who the hell is this?" She smiled faintly, ghost eye. The radio went silent for a beat. Then, "Ma'am, is that really you?" "Focus, Sergeant. What's your position?" They gave coordinates. She calculated in seconds. "Copy, extraction route East Ridge, 200 meters uphill. Hostile fire from South Canyon. Suppression in 30 seconds. Stay low." The Admiral's voice crackled over command comms. "Carter, you're running live ordnance control now. Confirm fire team coordinates." "Confirmed, sir." "Then it's your call." Her fingers hovered over the controls. The same steady precision she once had in the cockpit, now translated to a screen. She gave the order. "Fire team, grid lock on South Ridge. 2 bursts, then hold." "Roger that." Seconds later, the feed lit up with streaks of light, precision strikes hammering the canyon wall. Dust plumed, rock shattered, and the hostile markers vanished from the thermals. The room exhaled in unison. "Targets neutralized," the tech confirmed. Carter nodded, "Move them out." The comm feed crackled again. "Raven 6, we're clear, moving East Ridge now. How'd you see that interference through the haze?" She smiled faintly. "You learn to look where others don't." The Admiral's voice came through again, quiet, impressed. "Welcome back, Ghost Eye." But Carter didn't answer. Her eyes stayed fixed on the screen, tracking the extraction route, every motion etched with memory. Narrator voice slows, reflective. It wasn't flight, but it felt close. Her hands still moved, like they remembered the sky. Her breath still matched the rhythm of rotor blades that no longer existed. When the team finally cleared the canyon, the base erupted in relieved chatter. Applause, laughter, disbelief. But Carter simply removed her headset and set it down gently. She stood, watching the screen fade to gray. "Mission complete," someone said. Carter shook her head. "No, mission remembered." The Admiral entered the Overwatch bay a few minutes later. He looked at her, tired but proud. "Hell of a job," he said. She turned toward him, expression calm. "Just doing my job, sir." He smiled faintly. "You always say that." She looked back at the blank monitor. "Because it's always true." He studied her for a long moment. "You know, maybe the sky didn't take you away after all. Maybe it just changed altitude." Her lips curved, the ghost of a smile. "Maybe." The Admiral's voice softened. "We're rotating you into tactical command, quiet post, no fanfare, just work that matters." She nodded once. "Copy that." As he turned to leave, he stopped. "Aaron." She looked up. He hesitated, then said simply, "You saved them again." Her reply came after a long pause. "They saved me first." He gave a small nod. No salute this time, just understanding, and left the room. Carter sat back down, alone now, the hum of screens filling the space. She placed her hand lightly on the console, the metal warm from the work. Her reflection stared back from the black glass, older, steadier, softer. Voiceover slows to whisper. "Some battles never end, they just learn new names. And sometimes the heroes who stop flying never stop leading." She leaned back, closing her eyes, listening to the soft thrum of the generators. It almost sounded like rotors in the distance. The sound of home. How does a legend end? It doesn't. It just becomes the story others tell when they need to remember what courage sounds like. A month had passed since the operation. The base had returned to its rhythm, engines whining, boots clattering, comms murmuring in 1,000 overlapping codes. But something had changed. You could feel it in the way people paused when she entered a room. Not out of fear, not awe, respect. Carter noticed it, but never acknowledged it. Recognition wasn't the point. Continuity was. She still woke early, still made her own coffee, still limped the same pace from hangar to hangar. But now, every morning, she stopped for a moment at the edge of the runway and watched the sunrise over the water, the light breaking across the tarmac like a promise the world kept forgetting to keep. Her days were different now. No longer mission rosters and battle briefs. She spent her hours in the tactical simulator bay, a room filled with hums, screens, and the smell of metal and memory. That's where she first met Lieutenant Jalen Ross. He couldn't have been more than 23, fresh wings, too much energy in his stride, the kind of confidence that hadn't yet learned humility. He stood at the door that first morning, fidgeting with his gloves. "Ma'am," he said, trying to sound older than he was, "Admiral Hensley assigned me to you for Overwatch orientation." Carter looked up from the console. "You ever flown combat, Lieutenant?" "Not yet, ma'am, training only, but top of my class." She raised an eyebrow. "Then you haven't learned anything that matters yet." He blinked. "Ma'am." She nodded toward the simulator pod. "Sit. Let's see if you can listen as fast as you talk." He hesitated, then obeyed. The simulator door hissed shut behind him. Carter adjusted the controls from the observation desk. "You're entering a blind canyon under jamming interference. No GPS, no satellite overlay, only what your eyes and instinct give you. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good, then find your way out." For the next 20 minutes, she said almost nothing. She watched him overshoot a turn, misread thermal signatures, and push too hard on maneuvers that required patience, not speed. When he finally crashed the simulation, the feed froze on static. He sighed, removing the headset. "Damn it." Carter didn't look up. "You flew like you thought survival was owed to you." He frowned. "I was being aggressive." "You were being loud," she said softly. "There's a difference." He didn't answer. She stood, walking slowly to the pod door. "The sky doesn't care about your medals, Lieutenant. It only cares about your judgment." He nodded, chastened. "Understood." She studied him a long moment, then handed him a small data drive. "Watch this. Debrief footage from Trident Spear." He took it carefully, as if it were heavier than it looked. That's you." "It's the job," she said. "Not the story. Learn from the job." He hesitated again, then asked quietly, "What made you go back for them? You could have waited for extraction." Her eyes drifted toward the window, where a chopper was lifting into the gray sky. "When you're in the air," she said softly, "you stop thinking about self-preservation. You think about responsibility, the kind that lives longer than you do." He watched her carefully, realizing for the first time why the entire base seemed to speak her name like a prayer. "I won't forget that," he said. She nodded once. "See that you don't." That night Carter sat alone again, same bench, same horizon, same silence. But this time, she wasn't alone for the same reason. The wind moved differently now, carrying the faint echo of rotor blades from the training field. She could hear the younger pilots running drills, laughing between calm checks, unaware that someone outside the fence was still carrying the weight that let them fly freely. She smiled faintly, watching the stars come out one by one. From behind, the sound of footsteps, steady, deliberate. Admiral Hensley approached, hands in his coat pockets, eyes reflecting the same distant light. "Still can't sleep?" he asked. "Never could," she replied. He stopped beside her, gazing at the night sky. "You've built quite the reputation. Half the base is talking about your simulator sessions." She shrugged. "They'll stop talking when they start learning." He chuckled quietly, still humble as ever. "Humble's just another word for busy," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. "You've done more here than any citation could name. You know that, right?" "I didn't do it for that." "I know." Silence settled between them, not awkward, familiar. Finally, the Admiral reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "Thought you should have this." She frowned, taking it. Inside, resting on dark velvet, was a medal she hadn't seen before. Distinguished Service Cross. But engraved beneath the seal were 3 simple words. "For those who came home." She stared at it for a long moment. This wasn't approved through protocol. Hensley smiled faintly. "That's the point. It's not from the board, it's from the men you brought back." She exhaled, slow, careful. "They didn't have to." "They did," he said, "and so did I." She closed the box gently. "Thank you, sir." He nodded, looking out across the field. "There's something else." She turned. "We're rotating me out next month. Command transfer. They're sending me stateside." Carter was silent for a moment. "You'll hate it." "Already do," he said with a smile. They both laughed softly, the kind of laugh shared by people who have seen too much to find humor easily anymore. Then Hensley's tone shifted, quieter, heavier. "When I'm gone, they'll need someone who understands what leadership really is. Someone to remind them it's not noise or rank, it's grace under pressure." She met his eyes. "You're asking me to stay." "I'm asking you to guide them," he said, "even if they don't know it." Carter looked back toward the training field. Faint silhouettes of new recruits running under floodlights, their shouts blending with the low hum of machinery. "Maybe," she said softly, "that's all any of us ever do, keep the next ones from falling where we did." The Admiral smiled, quiet pride in his eyes. "Then you understand the assignment." He turned to leave but stopped after 2 steps. "Aaron," he said without turning back, "you've earned peace when you're ready for it." She watched him go, his figure fading into the mist, swallowed by the base lights. For a long time she just sat there, the metal box resting on her knee, the wind tugging at the loose strand of hair near her face. Then she opened her wrist, the titanium bracelet catching the light. Ghost I-07. She unclasped it slowly, feeling its weight leave her skin for the first time in years. When she stood, she walked toward the fence, toward the edge of the runway, where the horizon met the sea. A training chopper lifted off just then, the same model she'd once flown, its engines roaring into the dawn. Inside, she could see Jalen Ross at the controls, steady, alert, alive. She raised her hand, palm open, not a wave, a signal. He saw her, dip the nose in acknowledgment, a silent salute between generations. She smiled faintly, then turned her hand over and let the bracelet fall. It hit the concrete softly, rolling once before coming to rest under the edge of the fence, glinting gold in the sunrise. Her voice quiet, reverent, final. "Stay low, fly true." Narrator slows, soft, cinematic, poetic. Sometimes legends don't retire. They fade into the quiet where they belong, leaving behind echoes that teach the rest of us how to stand taller, speak less, and do what's right, even when no one's watching. The chopper climbed higher, blades cutting through the fog, the sound fading until all that remained was wind and light. Carter turned away from the runway, her limp steady, her gaze forward. She didn't need wings anymore. She'd already learned to carry the sky inside her. As she walked into the rising dawn, the narrator's voice lingers, soft, resolute, timeless. Sometimes courage isn't in the act of fighting. It's in the grace of letting go. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.